Hi, kids. What's for dinner?
Waffle Party.
Waffle Party?
Waffle Party.
Waffle Party.
In Severance Season 1, Episode 8, What's for Dinner, the Waffle Party scene shows us how Lumon commodifies intimacy by transforming sex into ritualized devotion to the company. This is conveyed through the mise-en-scène of Eagan's Replica home, the dim and foreboding lighting that sets this apart from the stark brightness of the rest of Lumon's interiors, and the intercut scenes of Miss Cobel's breakdown, which unfolds in parallel. By pairing Dylan's quote-unquote reward with Cobel's punishment, the sequence underscores how both intimacy and suffering are bent to Lumon's will. The scene begins when Mr. Milchek opens a large white door, revealing a dimly lit room that contrasts with the brightness of the Lumon hallway. The shadows inside create a new atmosphere, setting the stage for what Dylan is about to face. He is headed into the unknown. As Dylan enters, Milchek says, "Enjoy," with a condescending tone, underlying the control he holds in the moment. They exchange a wordless glance that adds tension before Dylan steps forward and begins descending the stairs in front of him. Mr. Milchek then shuts the door, cutting off the sterile light of Lumon and leaving Dylan in a world of dim light. The framing positions Dylan as small and vulnerable, his entry into this ritualized space dictated entirely by Lumon's authority. The door itself becomes a threshold, a movement from corporate sterility into something much darker. Dylan follows a cement path bordered by artificial grass. The path leads to a Victorian-style porch, emphasizing the uncanny quality of the set, both homelike and corporate. Dylan ascends the porch stairs and pushes open a large door, continuing deeper into the unsettling environment. The mise-en-scène situates Dylan as a participant in a ritual rather than a guest in a home. He is not greeted, he knows he doesn't belong there. The sound of the door closing is heard off-screen. Dylan turns a corner inside the house, entering a room that is almost completely dark except for the glow of two artificial candles placed on a table. The camera pounds downward onto a plate of waffles illuminated by the artificial candles, while Dylan remains out of focus in the background. This shift of emphasis from character to object reframes the food as a sacred offering rather than nourishment or food. Dylan sits at the table, framed centrally but engulfed by the surrounding shadow. 4 dim candles line the walls, and a bust of Kier Eagan can be seen in the background. The mise-en-scène isolates Dylan in a small pool of light, transforming the act of simply eating into a ceremony or a performance. The scene's use of lighting is especially notable, whereas every other space we've seen in Lumon thus far is brilliantly white and brightly lit. The replica home is engulfed in shadow, accented with deep blacks, dark woods, and dim candlelight. The contrast isolates Dylan in a pool of light at the table, reducing the act of eating waffles into an act of loyalty to Lumon, an act that could be compared to a cultish behavior. A bust of Kier Eagan shadowed in the background reinforces the sense of omnipresent surveillance, as though Dylan is never unobserved. Dylan picks up his utensils and briefly looks at the bust, as if acknowledging it, before turning back to his plate and cutting into the waffles with his knife. At this moment, the music begins to build, its crescendo heightening the tension of the scene. As Dylan consumes the waffles, the camera cuts to Miss Cobel speeding through the night in her car. Her side profile is lit by the dashboard's glow as she screams in anguish. The surrounding darkness outside the window adds to the sense of isolation. Miss Cobel continues to yell as the camera focuses in on her face. We see her anger build in her facial expression, her movements tense, reflecting her turmoil. She begins to cry. Miss Cobel's car moves very fast down a dark, wet neighborhood street. Miss Cobel is being succumbed by her own darkness. Having these scenes play out at the same time, Dylan's ritualized reward and Miss Cobel's punishment prove that they are both bound to Lumon's control. As Dylan finishes his waffles, he is surrounded by darkness. He leans back in his chair, chewing on his food. His eyes shift to the right, looking around, then he glances down to the plate. The inscription on it reads, "Go now to the founder's bed." The camera pans upward, the movement comes to rest on a dark mask lying on a bed, its stark presence framed by the surrounding shadows creating a sense of foreboding mystery. Dylan has just been told to get in bed with Lumon. Not only do they already have control of his mind, but now they are controlling his body. The mise-en-scène transforms the bedroom into an altar, preparing Dylan's transition from a ritualistic meal to ritual sex. Dylan leaves the table and approaches the bed with the founder. His hands reach into view, lifting the mask off the bed and revealing an object behind it, a flogging whip. Dylan dons the mask and sits stiffly on the bed. The framing reduces him from a subject to an object, a witness caught in Lumon's performance rather than an agent of his own. Moving forward, he is only able to experience sex through the founder's eyes. Through a cluster of glass bottles in the foreground, we see a figure enter the room wearing a jester mask. The faint jiggling of bells on the costume adds an eerie, unsettling sound to the dark space. The low lighting casts shadows across the figure, obscuring details and enhancing the mysterious, threatening presence. The composition with the bottles partially obscuring the entrance creates a sense of voyeurism and tension for the viewer. These shots reinforce the artificiality of the ritual, a performance staged for Dylan but also for Lumon itself. The jester begins to dance, its movements erratic and unsettling. Her costume shows cleavage, another sign that sexual pleasure can only be met through Lumon. Soon she is joined by a woman in white. She is wearing the mask of a woman's face that looks sad. She wears a veil over the mask and a white bra. This mask could represent that of a newly married woman who in many cultures abstains from sex until the night of her wedding. The woman in white continues to dance, her movements dramatic as she thrusts her arms forward before dropping them sharply to her side. The camera reveals more of her body. It becomes clear that she is wearing stockings and lingerie. Another dancer enters in an old man mask, her movements stylized and provocative as well. The camera alternates between Dylan's point of view and wide shots that render him isolated, reinforcing his role as observer of ritual rather than participant in sexual intimacy. It is only through Lumon that he is able to have this sexual experience. The choreography of the dancers' masks dramatizes the company's ideologies. Their movements and the mythic framing of the Four Tempers stage sexual intimacy, something that innies are denied, not as an act of human connection, but as a cultish dedication to the Lumon company. The camera reinforces this by altering between Dylan's perspective as he sits on the bed and wide shots that render him small and isolated with the mise-en-scène. Together, these techniques redirect the natural human sexual impulse into cult-like devotion, illustrating just how Lumon not only reshapes the mind, but also the body into instruments of control for their work. Ms. Cobel's car comes to a screeching stop in a driveway. Her car's headlights are the only illumination. Ms. Cobel storms into her darkened home, a darkness reminiscent of the Replica home. She slams the door, pounds on her walls, shrieks, knocks down jars, and rips down posters. She kneels in front of an altar and slowly brings her head down as if to offer a final plea. She then smashes the shrine that she has built to Kier. Close-ups of shattered glass and toppled objects once in the shrine parallel Dylan's forced devotion just as he is bound to the ongoing sexual ritual. Cobel has been bound to Kier in a cult-like mentality. She raises a hand to her chest and clutches it tightly, her body language conveying pain and desperation in the dimly lit room. The mise-en-scène of her home, dark, claustrophobic, and filled with newly broken items, mirrors Lumon's disciplining of the body and the spirit. Miss Cobel lays on the dark floor, crying and shrieking. The camera pans from her over to her hands, which are grasping a breathing tube. A hospital wristband labeled Cobel, Charlotte, falls to the ground. Its placement on the ground, partially caught in a low light, signals both neglect and significance. Even her suffering is inscribed with Lumon's control. Back at the house, all four dancers lift their arms in unison towards the left. Their movements are slow and deliberate. As their arms reach upward, they gradually turn their heads toward the bed. Their gazes shift inward, the synchronized tilt suggesting confusion or hesitation. They are collectively responding to something unseen on screen. By framing Dylan's experience as sacred yet isolating, while intercutting Miss Cobel's anger and grief, this sequence reveals the company's power to manipulate both desire and discipline. While Dylan is being rewarded for his dedication to the work that is mysterious and important, Miss Cobel is being punished. She was dedicated to the same work more than Dylan was, as she was not even a severed individual, and yet the company turned its back on her. They chastised her. The visual and cinematographic strategies including lighting, mise-en-scène, choreography, framing, and parallel editing of this scene communicate the deeper ideological truth that nothing Not even sexual intimacy or personal emotion can exist without Lumon. The Waffle Party transforms sexual intimacy into a ritual, devotion into control, and personal suffering into a consequence of disobedience. Lumon has ownership of body, mind, and desire.